It was late in the evening, and the house was eerily quiet. I was in the living room, curled up with a book, the soft hum of the air conditioner filling the silence. My son Ryan had been away at college for over 2 years, and I had gotten used to the solitude. My husband, Mike, worked late shifts, leaving me plenty of time to myself. But tonight I felt an unusual sense of restlessness. The sound of a car door slamming outside startled me. Peering out the window, I saw a familiar figure walking up the driveway. It was Ryan, his silhouette unmistakable in the dim glow of the streetlight. My heart leaped with joy and confusion. He hadn't mentioned coming home. I opened the door before he could knock, and there he was, taller, more confident, and with an air of maturity that caught me off guard. "Surprise, Mom," he said, pulling me into a warm hug. "What are you doing here?" I asked, still processing his sudden appearance. "I needed a break," he replied with a sheepish grin. "Thought I'd spend a few days at home." As we sat down to catch up, I couldn't help but notice how much he had changed. He wasn't the awkward teenager I remembered. His voice was deeper, his laughter more assured. It was a stark reminder of how time had flown by. We talked for hours, reminiscing about his childhood, his experiences at college, and my life at home. It felt good to have him back. But there was an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite put my finger on. An unease that lingered at the edges of our conversation. Later that night, as I was tidying up the kitchen, Ryan walked in, his expression unreadable. "Mom," he began hesitantly, "there's something I need to tell you." I turned to him, concerned. "What is it?" he hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "It's just, I've been thinking a lot lately about us, about how close we used to be." His words hung in the air, heavy with an emotion I couldn't identify. "We are close," I said, trying to reassure him we always have been. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, but I feel like there's more to it. Like maybe we've drifted apart because of everything, college, Dad's work life." I didn't know how to respond. There was an intensity in his gaze that made me uncomfortable, but I dismissed it as my imagination. "Let's not overthink it," I said lightly, placing a hand on his arm. "You're home now, and that's all that matters." Brian nodded, but the unease lingered. The next morning, the house was filled with the aroma of coffee and freshly baked cinnamon rolls. It had been a long time since I prepared breakfast for someone else, and it felt oddly comforting to be back in the routine. Ryan walked into the kitchen, his hair towels and his expression relaxed. "Smells amazing, Mom. You didn't have to go all out." "I wanted to," I replied with a smile. "It's nice having you home." As we sat down to eat, Ryan's demeanor was noticeably lighter. He talked about his plans, his struggles at school, and his uncertainty about the future. I listened, offering advice where I could, but mostly just letting him vent. "You've always been the one I could talk to," he said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "Dad's great, but he's, well, you know how he is, stiff, distant." I nodded, understanding his sentiment. Mike had always been a provider first, a father second, and an emotional presence last. "Sometimes I wish things were different." Ryan continued, his eyes meeting mine like it was just the two of us. His words caught me off guard, but I forced to laugh. "That's sweet, Ryan. But you know, we're a team, Dad. You and me," he leaned back. "Studying me, yeah. But sometimes it feels like you're the only one who really gets me." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I changed the subject, asking about his friends and his classes. He obliged, but there was a lingering tension in the air that I couldn't shake. As the day went on, Ryan stuck close to me, helping with chores and insisting on spending time together. We went for a walk in the park, something we hadn't done since he was a teenager. It was a pleasant day, but his comments grew more personal, more probing. "Do you ever regret the life you chose, Mom?" he asked as we strolled along a tree-lined path. "Why would you ask that?" He shrugged. "I don't know. You just seem like you gave up so much for Dad and me. Do you ever wonder what things would be like if you'd made different choices?" His question stung more than I cared to admit. "I love the life I have," I replied firmly. "You and your father mean everything to me." Ryan stopped walking and turned to face me. "But do you ever think about yourself? What you want, what makes you happy?" I stared at him, unsure of what he was trying to say. "Ryan, I'm happy. You don't need to worry about me." He nodded slowly, but his expression was unreadable. That evening after dinner, I was in the living room watching a movie when Ryan joined me. He sat closer than necessary, and for the first time I felt a strange shift in our dynamic. "You're so beautiful, Mom," he said out of nowhere. I laughed nervously. "Where's this coming from?" "It's true," he insisted. "You've always been beautiful. I just don't think I've ever told you that." The comment unsettled me, but I brushed it off as harmless flattery. Still, I couldn't deny the growing tension between us. A tension I didn't know how to address. The days that followed were a mixture of nostalgia and discomfort. Ryan's presence in the house was both a blessing and a burden. He was helpful and attentive, but his remarks grew increasingly bold, and his attention felt misplaced. One evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, Ryan leaned against the counter, watching me intently. "You're different from other moms," he said, his tone casual, but his words deliberate. "How so?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "You're not like them, you're smart, funny, and you actually care. You're special." I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. "Ryan, I'm your mom. That's my job," he smiled. But it didn't put me at ease. "I know, I just think sometimes you don't realize how amazing you are." I forced to laugh, brushing off his comment. But the unease lingered later that night. As I sat in my room reading, Ryan knocked on the door. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Of course," I replied. Setting my book aside, he entered, his hands in his pockets, and sat down on the edge of the bed. "I wanted to talk to you about something." "Go ahead," I said that. My stomach tightened with apprehension. He hesitated, looking down at his hands. "Do you ever feel like we don't say everything we should? Like there's more we could share with each other?" My frown. "Ryan, what's going on?" "You've been acting strange since you got here." He looked up, his eyes intense. "I just feel like there's a part of me that only you understand. I can't explain it. But it's like we're connected in a way that goes beyond mother and son." My breath caught in my throat. "Ryan, I don't know what you mean, but this is starting to make me uncomfortable." "I'm sorry," he said, quickly standing up. "I didn't mean to upset you. I don't know how to explain what I'm feeling." I stood as well, trying to study my nerves. "Ryan, you're my son. I love you, but there are boundaries that we can't cross. Do you understand?" He nodded, his expression a mix of guilt and frustration. "I know, I just forget it." "Good night, Mom." As he left the room, I sank onto the bed, my mind racing. His words, his tone, his lingering looks, they all pointed to something I wasn't ready to confront. The next day, I decided to address the situation directly. Over breakfast, I looked at him and said, "Ryan, we need to talk about what—" he asked, though the tension in his voice suggested he already knew about us. "About how you've been acting." He sighed, setting down his fork. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I I've missed you, and I guess I don't know how to deal with it. Ryan, I've missed you too. But you need to understand that the way you've been behaving, it's not okay. I know, he said quietly. I'll try to do better. I nodded, relieved, but still uneasy. The conversation was over, but the tension wasn't. The atmosphere between Ryan and me remained strained, but we both tried to act as though everything was normal. I focused on keeping busy, spending my days cleaning the house and running errands, while Ryan seemed to make a conscious effort to keep his distance. A few days later, Mike was home from work earlier than usual, which gave me a sense of relief. The usual family dynamic returned for a while, and I clung to it, hoping it would dissolve the tension that it built between Ryan and me. That evening, after Mike had gone to bed, Ryan and I found ourselves alone in the living room. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone while I folded laundry. The silence was comfortable at first, but then he spoke. "Mom," he began, setting his phone down. "I need to say something." I froze my hands, gripping the shirt I was folding. "What is it, Ryan?" He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking about what you said, and you're right, I crossed a line. I've been acting weird and I can't explain why." I exhaled, relieved that he was addressing it. "Ryan, I'm glad you realize that I've been worried about you." He looked at me, his expression earnest. I guess coming home brought up a lot of emotions I didn't expect. College has been hard and I felt so disconnected from everything. Seeing you again reminded me of how safe I used to feel here. How much I rely on you. His words softened my defenses and I moved to sit beside him. "Ryan, it's okay to feel lost or overwhelmed. But you have to remember that our relationship is built on trust and respect. That's what makes it special." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I know, I just wanted you to understand that it wasn't about you. It was about me. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable." I reached out and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for saying that. I'm here for you. But we need to keep our bond healthy and respectful." For the first time in days, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Ryan and I sat in silence for a while, the unspoken understanding between us settling into something more stable. Over the next few days, Ryan seemed more like himself. The awkwardness dissipated, replaced by the easy camaraderie we'd always shared. When it was time for him to return to college, I hugged him tightly, grateful that we had confronted the tension and found a way through it. "Take care of yourself," I said, as he loaded his bags into the car. "You too, Mom," he replied with a smile. "Thanks for everything." As I watched him drive away, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. The visit had been unexpected and challenging, but it had also reminded me of the importance of boundaries, love, and communication. Life returned to normal, and though the memory of those days lingered, it served as a reminder that relationships, no matter how close, require clarity and care to thrive.